Today's shout out is for Zuldinga. Galadriel Light of Valinor versus Sythis, Verrak, and Sharuum the Hegemon. We are in the replay feature here. It's around turn 6 on this player's turn, I think, where we can rejoin the live gameplay. Forgot to hit the record button, as will happen once in a blue moon. I think we have to mulligan down to 5 if my memory serves. Yeah, so this was the next hand. Decided to bin this one as well. We have no green mana whatsoever and a fistful of green cards in hand, plus we have no ramp. And yeah, this is the one that we have to plump for. Decide to ditch the perplexing test and keep a Sol Ring and maybe refill the hand with Armorcraft Judge. But if this game's luck is anything to go by, I'm thinking that we're just going to draw 2 cards into the commander. A Temple of Plenty from the Sythis player, going for a Scry on turn 1. And we managed to draw into an Aura Mutation, which I'm hoping is going to be good against an Enchantress player. Side on the tap land though, don't want to go for a Sol Ring on turn 1 because obviously you're just baiting removal, and if we can use that to get down our commander into the Armorcraft Judge on the next turn, then we'll draw a couple of cards at least. But hopefully more with the Aura Mutation. Noteworthy that Sharuum the Hegemon has gone for Profane Tutor on turn 2, and it's a Call of the Ring for the Verrak player. Sythis plays a Sol Ring and then bounces a tap land with the Celestia Sanctuary, which isn't preferable, playing a tap land for another tap land, but I don't imagine Sythis will struggle catching up anytime soon. Just another land for us in the form of a Tundra, so play that out into the Sol Ring, ready for playing the commander next turn. Then we see another tutor from Sharuum. It is Demonic Tutor into the Sol Ring, which takes him into the Lightning Greaves. And the ring tempting Verrak for the first time, so that will be level 1. And down comes the Warped Sengia into play. Sythis straight into play and able to cantrip with an enchantment immediately. Fertile Ground goes onto a basic. That is a little bit of ramp and keeps them at 7 cards in hand. And while we keep drawing into mana, it is our plan to go with Galadriel and into the Armorcraft Judge, as I have mentioned a few times here. Meanwhile, Sharuum is going off. The Profane Tutor has its last counter removed, so we'll get a second tutor by turn 4. And then we see Recurring Insight. That was pointed at the Sythis player, so Sharuum drew up to 11 and then down to 10 by playing a Jeweled Lotus. Has to discard down to hand size. That is Kaldra Complete, a land, and Chromatic Lantern in the bin. And now the Call of the Ring is going to make Verrak the Ring Bearer. And of course that takes Verrak up to level 2 on this as well, so it will loot whenever our opponent attacks. Playing and cracking immediately a Prismatic Vista, so can get 2 lands off the back of a fetch that has you pay a life in order to get a land out. And then swinging into the left against the Sharuum player, who is obviously going off over here, so wanting to deal as much damage over there as possible. Discards a land to the loot. And then we see an Argyll's Bloodfast, so able to dump a decent amount of life and mana into that in order to draw cards, but gonna have to be careful on the life front with that, obviously. Speaking of which, Sythis continues to gain life, and I'm quite liking the look of the privileged position, because what we'll be able to do next turn is go Aura Mutation onto that, get a bunch of plus counters, and then play the Armorcraft Judge in the same turn and refill our hand completely. But of course, unfortunately, our opponent had other ideas. That is a Sterling Grove, so all of our opponent's enchantments are going to have both Shroud and Hexproof. And that's just dumb luck that our opponent was able to get into both of these, unfortunately. But Sythis continuing to set up over there, completely switched off any targeted removal anyone might have. And we just keep drawing into mana, a Wooded Foothills this time. So we have to stick with the plan of going for the Armorcraft Judge. And if we do the stack correctly, then we can go Galadriel, triggering first, or resolving first I should say, so Armorcraft Judge on the stack first so that it resolves last, and Galadriel on the stack last so it resolves first. We want the plus counters for the Armorcraft Judge to see, even if it is a case of only drawing 2 cards. Now I suppose what I should have done here is gone for Aura Mutation onto the Argyll's Bloodfast or onto the Call of the Ring. And we could have made some Saprolings and then drawn more with this, but as it happens we have little to no luck this game anyway. Drew into Curiosity Crafter, ready for when we actually do get some tokens into play. And another land. Recurring Insight has Rebound, so they target the Sythis again and draw 7 more. So cracking the Jeweled Lotus and getting Sharuum the Hegemon into play, targeting the Caldra Complete, which was discarded previously. And that is followed by hard casting a Steel Overseer, immediately putting the Lightning Greaves onto there to give it haste, puts a plus counter on both the Sharuum and the Steel Overseer. This is a Germ token, so not an artifact creature, but equipped up has First Strike Haste, Indestructible Trample and +5/+5. And then equipping the Hegemon with the Lightning Greaves to give it Shroud, surprisingly not attacking in with anything there. So Argyll's Bloodfast is played at the end of the turn, or paid for with the activated ability, and our opponent does decide to lose some more life to the Verrak and draw 2 cards for that. Sun Titan into play during Verrak's main phase and reanimates the Prismatic Vista, which again can fetch 2 lands out of the deck while Verrak is in play. So able to hold up mana for the Argyll's Bloodfast again, and decides to swing in at Sharuum the Hegemon again, looting away a Bloodstained Mire, but instead of holding up the card draw goes for Talisman of Hierarchy instead. Abundance, another good one that we would like to point targeted removal at, but not going to be able to this game apparently. And then Destiny Spinner, making Sythis even more difficult to deal with, means that the creatures and enchantments can't be countered over there. And then cantripping again, that is a Baffling End, and targets the Steel Overseer with that, exiling it permanently. And it's noteworthy that during the cantrips with Sythis we are seeing different cards here from Abundance. A Force of Virtue is in hand, as is an Always Watching. I think I held on to the Aura Mutation. I'm trying to remember the commentary that I made in the previous video, or in this video, during the time when I wasn't recording. I think I said I was holding on to the Aura Mutation in the hope that someone would manage to deal with Privileged Position or the Sterling Grove, but I suppose the odds of that were pretty slim without a board wipe. So decide on the Aura Mutation now, go against the Bloodfast, and that gets us into a couple of Saproling tokens. One is Scry 2 and Draw, and I'm pretty sure that we just saw 2 lands on the top here, as is pretty typical for this entire video. And then when we do draw, we just draw into a land anyway, plus counter on all of our stuff as well. This is supposed to be a token variant of the build, hence cards like Curiosity Crafter, but don't have the best of luck in getting into token producers during this game. And there is a Stroke of Midnight, speaking of token generation. So we know about the Force of Virtue on our opponent's side of the field, but we have to play to our outs and force them to use it anyway. Curiosity Crafter allows us to put a plus counter on all of our stuff with the Galadriel when it enters, and that means that these tokens are currently big enough to tangle with both Sythis and Destiny Spinner, or whatever this thing's called. Yeah, Destiny Spinner. So turn the commander and the 2 tokens in sideways, hoping that the 2 tokens will hit, and we can draw a couple of cards that way, or we manage to get our opponent to exile a card from hand in order to play the Force of Virtue, which is exactly what happens, and he did exile a Banalish Marshal in order to do that. So it seems as though it's an Anthem build our opponent's gone for. Did cantrip on casting that, so showing us a Sylvan Library going into hand. And doing that, of course, will buff the Destiny Spinner up enough to survive a block, so a 3/4 going up against a 3/3, we only get 1 Saproling token through, which means we draw 1 card to the Owl, and we do land 6 commander damage as well, which could be relevant. So landing the token damage, we managed to draw into a Return of the Wild Speaker with some big cards in play. That could actually be handy for us. So just casting a Kodama's Reach with the surplus mana, might as well ramp a little bit. Decide to hold off on the Stroke of Midnight whilst there are bigger threats at the table that probably shouldn't be swinging in at us. And I think I should be able to leave you there and take you back into the live commentary, so hopefully that has made sense and you've been able to keep up so far. And I will see you all in about half a second. And now seeing a Sword of Fire and Ice as well, equipping to the Esper Sentinel, so pro blue and red, and probably more importantly, it is buffed, so he's now a 3/3, making it more difficult to pay the tax on that. Lightning Greaves over to there as well. Sharuum goes in at Varal's, and just that 1 creature attacking here. So curious that he didn't have the sword on here while he could have got a trigger on it. Shows that he wants to continue to hold up the 2 mana counter magic we're assuming he has. So the ring being fully leveled up by the Varal's player here. Whenever your ring bearer deals combat damage to a player, each opponent loses 3 life. That could be useful for helping to chip away at the Sharuum player. Archivist of Ogma being played at sorcery speed, followed by a Blood Tracker. So black, pay 2, put a plus counter on it, and when it leaves the battlefield, draw a card for each plus counter on it. So it can be bounced, exiled, destroyed, sacrificed. No matter how you have it leave the battlefield, it will draw you cards. Sun Titan goes in at the right, Varal's swings over at us, and they will loot again from the ring. Sun Titan is pointed at the enchantment. Argyle's Bloodfest we blew up previously, so ultimately no harm done there. Although we are keeping them off the Prismatic Vista so they don't keep ramping. We will just take the damage, looks as though Sythis is as well. And then deals combat damage to us, so each opponent loses 3 life, so we lose 5 in total there, including 2 commander. Revealing to us a Krovax this time during the draw phase. And it's the Sylvan Library being cast that we saw previously. Doubt he's going to pay the tax into the Esper Sentinel. So Sharuum going to go up to 12 cards in hand. Chooses land this time, so revealing a Plains to us. And plays the Plains straight away. And we know about the Always Watching, so they decide to play that. And reveals to us Oath of the Ancient Wood into his hand. Okay, there's a card we didn't know about. Looks as though this is Anthem Tribal though. Maybe looking at making some tokens, or literally just buffing up the enchantresses. Revealing a Mana Crypt this time. He's tapped out all his coloured mana this turn though. Alright, let's see a non-land please. Alright, there's an Arasta. So we can go for Arasta and hold up the Return of the Wildspeaker, I think is fine. Because I'm worried about Sharuum countering this on our turn, seeing as how he knows he doesn't have to hold up counter magic for anything else after we go for Return of the Wildspeaker. Much as I'd like to draw cards and maybe play something this turn, it's best to do this on your opponent's turns and force them to counter then. So let's drop another basic, because I'm always paranoid about contamination and, well, we don't have to worry about Blood Moon, but you get what I mean. So this can be Arasta, and I don't think we necessarily have to worry about more plus counters. So let's go for the mana. Means we could go for Return of the Wildspeaker now, but again it's that counter magic thing, so let's just go for Scry 2 and draw. Try and get these lands off the top that I'm sure are on top of the library. Yep, there's a Wood Elves and a land, so land on the bottom. If we go Wood Elves, we could make the mana and still go for Return of the Wildspeaker, but yeah, same predicament as previously mentioned, so bottom and draw into a land. Can't stop drawing into lands today. So let's go Curiosity Crafter in at the left and Galadriel in at the right. If they want to gang up on that, then I'll take out their Sythis, which they might not mind recasting. Is commander damage going to be relevant this game? I'd rather not replay the commander, but we'll risk it, because commander damage may well be relevant. Alright, damage being taken by both players, that's good. It's noteworthy that we do control 2 legendary creatures now, so this is 2 and this is 1 in order to activate, but we will leave it there. Okay, there's a Cyclonic Rift overloaded, doing it at sorcery speed at least. So we can either go for Stroke of Midnight, we could go for Stroke of Midnight and Otawara, or we could just draw a bunch with Return of the Wildspeaker and try and do some other things next turn. Yeah, let's go Return of the Wildspeaker here, so draw cards. May well be that we draw into Fierce Guardianship here as well, which, like I keep saying, I have no doubt our opponent's got counter magic held up, but we'll see if he wants to use the mana drain or whatever it is he has in hand. Doesn't look as though he's going to. Blood Tracker being activated now and may well be copied by the Verrak. This thing is going to leave play here if Cyclonic Rift has its way. So they will draw cards. Deciding not to copy the ability, just 1 plus counter on there. And if we had an extra mana there, we could try and offer you can't refuse, but don't have it unfortunately. Got another chance thanks to the spider coming in to draw into something though. Adding the mana doesn't do anything, so scry 2 and draw. Digs us potentially 3 cards into the library. Alright, an Aura Shard should be particularly good against Sharuum. Wolverine Riders is great with the commander as well. It's going to take us a turn cycle to get that going though. But yeah, that on top, Aura Shards on top, and then we draw into the Aura Shards. Alright, so the Blood Tracker is triggering and going to draw our opponent a card. The Baffling End will trigger as well and put a dinosaur into play over here. And weirdly, on Magic Online, it's looking like an actual creature for whatever reason. So throwing the Lightning Greaves onto there in order to deal 3 more damage this turn. And we get a 5/5. The Sharuum goes in down the middle. We get the 3/3 as well. No hate for Sythis for whatever reason. A 3/3 over here as well. I know Sythis has gone down to only a few lands, but we all know how good Sythis is and how fast it can be. Maybe looking to mana drain the privileged position over here. Alright, so Sword of Fire and Ice hits. We will see where the shot goes. Looks like it's going over at Sythis. And we go down to 23. We're all at fairly even life totals now. Forgot to move the Lightning Greaves over, which is noteworthy. Archivist of Ogma does have flash, so that's back in before the end of the turn. Aetherflux Reservoir is nowhere near that at the moment, but is going to start gaining life, which you would want to if you keep using your life to activate abilities. Esper Sentinel going to continue to draw cards over here. And is this going to be the thing that fishes out that counterspell that I'm sure he's been holding on to all that time? I think I would have allowed that down personally because it's easily destroyed, and I don't think this player's going to be comboing off. I mean, you always run that risk, but yeah, worried about our opponent being able to land Shroud and hexproof on everything again. Anyway, throwing out a Cruel Sadist, an Esper Sentinel of his own, the Argyle's Bloodfast again, and the Talisman again as well. Ending the turn with 7 cards in hand, is able to swing in with this in order to get a loot effect. Should be turning in at Sharuum, you would think. Deciding not to turn in at all. Yeah, wanting to chump block with that maybe. Mana Crypt being played into 2 Esper Sentinels. And then the Sol Ring comes back out as well. Esper Sentinel only triggers once a turn, thankfully. Still going to draw plenty of cards though. Sythis back into play again, 16 cards in that player's hand. And now we see a Gaia's Touch able to generate some more mana. Activating the Gaia's Touch in order to get a free forest into play. Fertile Ground again, this time onto the plains. And there's that pesky Sterling Grove, holding up the mana for a tutor with that potentially. Not seeing the privileged position yet though, so maybe Aura Shard's going to come in handy against that. Sacrificing the Gaia's Touch in order to generate mana, so yeah, it does have the mana for the... Alright, not playing it though. It is Karametra, God of Harvests instead. That is animated, so an indestructible 6/7 with Shroud. And finishing up the turn. And finishing up the turn with that Scryland, which we haven't seen since turn 2, I think it was. Does have to discard 7 cards down to hand size here. Alright, so what do we want to do here? Obviously we want our commander back in play, but I'm not sure if we're actually going to be able to make all that many creatures into it, unfortunately, while we're rebuilding. Rabble Rousing could help us. Well, we definitely want these pieces of fast mana coming into play, so we'll have to allow Esper Sentinels to draw again. So, drawing a card here and here. Say no to both of them. Then Sol Ring again. Esper Sentinel doesn't trigger more than once a turn, thankfully. Alright, so we've got 8 mana after an Aura Shards, which means we could maybe go for the Arasta and for the Curiosity Crafter. It's unfortunate that we can't make use of the mana from this, but we need to play things in a specific order. So yeah, we definitely want Aura Shards first. Just a shame that we're giving our opponents a chance to actually deal with that. And I don't imagine there'll be all that many instants and sorceries being played, unfortunately, which is what we need in order to get tokens with this. So let's get another green mana with the Wooded Foothills. It's a shame that we're not seeing Scoot Swarm or something like that. We'd be able to blow up all the artifacts and enchantments. Archivist of Ogma going to gain a life and draw, thanks to the fact that we just tutored. And yeah, really annoyed that we have to go after the Sterling Grove here, because I'd definitely like to concentrate on Sharuum, but want Hexproof and Shroud on everything over there, so have to target that. And then as much as I want to go for Curiosity Crafter or something like that to get another trigger on the Aura Shards, I mean, what I'd really like is getting a bunch of tokens into play. But not having the best of luck on that front here, so holding up the Stroke of Midnight and the Offer You Can't Refuse, as well as a Ganjo and Otawara. Yeah, that's going to be the play here, I think. Just having to get rid of a lot of the support cards, unfortunately. I'm hoping that we'll be able to make a big dumb idiot in the form of Galadriel if we can't get lots of tokens into play and refill our hand with Prime Speaker Zagana. A Mana Vault with alternative artwork. Our Arasta, unusually, isn't as good as it could be. Usually see lots of instants and sorceries flying around, but it'll be mainly artifacts and enchantments we see this game. And then it is Avacyn, Angel of Hope. Flying Vigilance indestructible, other permanents you control have indestructible. And then the Lightning Greaves going on to there, so is it time to go Otawara, bounce this thing? Try and have our opponent counter it? So Otawara discarded, attempting to bounce the Avacyn. Will be more difficult to counter because this isn't a spell, it is an activated ability. So our opponent not able to do anything about that apparently. Does mean that he may well be looking in our direction with any more damage he wants to be dealing though. Okay, next champion is Protection from All Colours. And could have haste as well. Not sure if they've made a land this turn. They could make a land and then equip it with this, so that it can definitely get through everyone. Instead, just deciding to put the Lightning Greaves onto the commander. Okay, and our opponent not being reactionary at least. We get the 5/5 Germ. Sharuum goes in at the Orzhov player. And the Esper Sentinel, equipped with the sword, goes in towards Sythis. So Sythis might as well block here, I suppose, because this thing's going to get shocked either way, unless he wants to force our opponent to make the target. Could keep our opponent off a card draw if he blocks. Noteworthy that getting rid of the Sterling Grove did deanimate the god as well. And he'll lose even more devotion if Sythis goes down. Alright, so the Sword of Fire and Ice did go through. Sythis decided to force the issue, and the commander getting shocked. So as much as I want to see the back of Sharuum, we're at least being helped along, keeping the Sythis from going off completely. I think it was the right move to get rid of the Sterling Grove. More fast mana in the form of a mana crypt this time. Noteworthy that Sythis is in the graveyard here, so may well be that we see mass reanimation on the enchantments, which could be worth holding on to, an offer you can't refuse for. Try and leave Sythis stuck in the graveyard. All depends on what Sharuum does here, really. Arcane Signet. Then an Aethersworn Sphinx, affinity for artifacts, so it costs next to nothing. Flying and Cascade on a 4/4. And manages to get into teleportation circles, so we'll be able to flicker the Sharuum. As long as it doesn't have Shroud, we'll see if our opponent remembers that. Cascade is a cast ability, so flickering that won't do anything. Lightning Greaves going over to the Esper Sentinel, so looks as though our opponent is remembering that he needs to be able to target his commander. So untapping Sharuum, knocking the plus counter off it as well, and is able to reanimate something. Targets the Jeweled Lotus, thinking that he's going to lose his Sharuum to the Aura Shards at some point. Some instants and sorceries from the Orzhov player would be welcome. Well, that's not one. A Bolas's Citadel, heavy on the artifacts this game. Only 13 life available to our opponent, so looking to hit lucky here. And it's another enchantment, a Righteous Aura. A Cryptghast is going to double up the swamps, has 2 untapped at the moment. 7 life our opponent's gone down to. Manages to make another land. Not sure how many cards he had in hand, so I'll assume that came off the top. Sol Ring comes out of the hand. Is able to pay Extort if he wants to. We'll gain a nice chunk of life from that. Looks like he is paying it, probably a good idea. So each of us gets drained for 1. And then it is a Grey Merchant of Asphodel, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Each of us will be drained for. And then paid the Extort cost as well, so goes up to 13. We each go down to 7. Sythis goes down to 15. And just like that, he's back up to 37 over here. May well be able to pull out a win out of nowhere if he's lucky. A Kambal is going to hurt us if we want to go for the offer you can't refuse. Only got a finite number of non-creature spells that we can play into that. Alright, and Bolas's Citadel. Looks like he's wanting to sacrifice a bunch of non-land permanents. We'll be able to get rid of 2 of us, won't be able to get rid of the Sythis with that though. So yeah, that's us done. Each opponent loses 10 life, and fancies his odds against the Sythis with only 5 life. Noteworthy that Sythis can gain a hell of a lot of life though, especially if he goes for some mass reanimation on the next turn, as we suspect he will do. So down we go. At least the Sharuum, who we assumed was going to win that one, didn't end up winning, ended up losing out of nowhere against the Orzhov player, but very intrigued to see what he can get going off the Bolas's Citadel, leaving Sythis at 5 life. Obviously could have countered this, but I mean, we've been between several rocks and several hard places all game, so Suppose it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other with regards to what we actually counter. Got a mana crypt to fight against as well, manages to dodge that though. So draws up to 8 cards in hand, plays a Pain Land. Looks like he's tapping out for a big spell immediately. Could just be a Sun Titan for the Sythis. Noteworthy that he could have done this at instant speed, so could have waited to see what Sythis was going to do maybe, and then not allowed us to have a turn. Anyway, it is the Marshal's Anthem. Looks like he's just going for multi-kicker and trying to reanimate stuff with that. So goes after 2 creatures in Krovax and the Sythis, which animates the Karametra again, so 8 damage over here, greatly reduces the number of spells he can get with this, assuming that it can't be removed by the Enchantress player. And there's that privileged position again that we've been so worried about all game. Goes up to 6 life, and decides to tap out at that. The Karametra almost has to swing in, because it's a race against time for Sythis at this point. And our opponent hasn't discarded the Abundance at any point, so we'll assume that's still in his hand. He did discard this, which was revealed previously. So we don't know, apart from Abundance, I don't think we know what's in his hand, unless any of you can remember what was bounced back with the Rift. Anyway, an Alhamrit's Archive straight off the top, down to 24 life, and down to 24 life. And then a Farewell, so yeah, that's why our opponent wasn't all that worried about the Enchantress player. Farewell is about the best card you could play against him. Goes after the graveyards as well. And then we see a Soul Warden, so every creature that comes down now is going to gain 2 life thanks to the Archive. And plays a Priest of Fellrights into that. 23 life and 7 cards in hand. And then Verrak into play again. Managing to dodge the Mana Crypt again though. So getting Sythis out. I don't think it's been removed all game, so only costs 4 mana. But Soul Warden triggers on all creatures entering, so back up to 27. And Sigil of the Empty Throne is an excellent one. You have a Maya going to fix the green mana, which is useful when you've got a Pain Land and little life available. Utopia Sprawl makes everything a forest, so can enchant that. That will effectively pay for itself, it's pretty much free. Triggers Sigil of the Empty Throne for an Angel as well, and waited on the D-Spark on the Sigil until it was triggered. I think he had a chance to blow this up before then, so an Angel going to come into play when it didn't necessarily need to. But yeah, Verrak really starting to go off here. Flowering of the White Tree, yet another Anthem. And then Femeref Enchantress, that one triggers on when an enchantment is put into a graveyard from the battlefield. Noteworthy that it happens for any enchantment on the battlefield, not just your own. Alright, and there, finally seen a sorcery. Bit late for us though, a Sign in Blood. Going to take 4 life to draw 4 cards by the looks of it. I think that came off the top. Marsh Flats is another fetch. Taps for green, but could activate it to get an additional land out with Verrak. We see a Sturge. 1/1 flyer that can't block, and you can draw a card by paying 2 1 life and sacrifice it. And it goes particularly well with the Soul Sisters and Verrak. A Serret Ascendant will have 30 life as soon as it comes into play thanks to the Soul Warden. So upon entry gets buffed up to a 6/6 flyer with lifelink. And still with 7 cards in hand, that is a Vilis, Broker of Blood, being played from the hand. And is making sure to hold up black mana for that. So with triple black, could use this to get rid of the Sythis. And is cracking the Marsh Flats. Will debuff the Serret Ascendant, which is noteworthy. But it could be that that gets buffed up again during Sythis' turn. So yeah, Verrak doubling up the Marsh Flats trigger when he loses life. Draws that many cards thanks to the Vilis. Went for the Godless Shrine, deciding to shock that in simply to draw more cards with Vilis maybe. Sinister Concoction now. Pay 1 life, black, mill, discard. Sack it to destroy a creature. So they'll be able to get rid of 2 creatures with this. A Font of Agonies as well. And then, yeah, getting rid of the enchantment. Sacrificing the Concoction, which will put counters on the Font of Agonies. And draw more cards with Vilis. They can copy it with Verrak if they want to. Noteworthy that this triggers on the enchantment leaving the battlefield. And deciding to destroy a couple of creatures by the looks of it. So yeah, going after the Enchantress and the Angel, and it's even more Vilis and Font of Agony stuff. And now Varal's able to swing in and deal a couple more points of commander damage, knocking him down to 6. Ending the turn with 15 cards in hand, we'll have to discard down to hand size. And deciding to cast a Force of Virtue again, which was bounced back to hand previously. Looks like he exiled the Always Watching in order to cast that. Not managing to dodge the mana crypt this time, so teetering at 4 life. Plenty of mana in order to cantrip a bunch of enchantments though. All depends on what our opponent has available. A Mirari's Weight gonna double up the mana as well as cantrip. And there's the Abundance again, going to keep himself from drawing too many lands. Crossum Grip deals with the Bolas's Citadel. And there we see an Enchantress finally, the Sythis champion. We'll start doubling up on the enchantments. Sanctum Weaver not going to have haste most likely, but we'll draw 2 cards. Not sure Sythis is going to be able to survive this against the big flyers. And a Deadly Rollick. Yeah, the Orzhov player has an answer to everything. Noteworthy that this is whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield, so there was no harm done waiting for our opponent to cast an enchantment into it there. But yeah, it seems as though Verrak has just been holding back most of the game and has really gone off in the past few turns. We have seen a Collective Blessing from our opponent from the Abundance, which I'm sure isn't what our opponent wants to see. Instead it is a Karmic Justice being played and showing us a Words of Wilding. Next time you would draw a card, instead create a 2/2 bear. So wanting to make tokens and go wide with the Anthem effects in play. Bit more of a unique variant on the Sythis deck. Swords to Plowshares goes on to the Villis, so managing to exile that quite quickly, putting him up to 51 life though, although the Bolas's Citadel has gone down at least. And then just deciding to scoop it up. Yeah, he is at 8 life. We can see the cards that are in his hand. Collective Blessing we saw the Words of Wilding. The Dictate of Heliod isn't of much use to him either, so similar to us, had all the setup effects but didn't have means of making a bunch of creatures or tokens really. Over for the Orzhov player was Authority of the Consuls, Black Market Connections, a land, Generous Gift, he had even more removal, a Greed, and Savine's Reclamation to fish more stuff out of the graveyard. Yeah, that turned out to be a really fun one in the last few turns there. I think we might have been forgiven for thinking that Verrak was one of the underdogs along with us, but managed to pull out a convincing victory in the end. We didn't do too well with my version of this deck, being a token variant, but maybe have to tweak a few things. It is only the first game that I've played with it, so I'll run Galadriel tokens again if you're at all interested, and hopefully we'll do better next time, but I think this is well worthwhile showing you all because it was an interesting game, or I think it was anyway. Let me know what you think in the comments section. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.